Welcome to Brigham Young's Extermination of Utah Indians video. In Utah Valley, the Indians were stealing cattle from the Mormons for food. The Mormons had three choices, Apostle Parley P. Pratt claimed: abandon their southern colonies, defend them, or leave them to destruction. So a lot of conflict, a lot of violence going on between the Mormons and the Indians in the early days of Utah. All right, so for this video, I used a book in the Kingdom in the West series, volume number 16, The Whites Want Everything, Indian-Mormon Relations, 1847 to 1877, edited by Will Bagley, or Bagley. I'm not quite sure how to say his name. Bagley is pictured on the left here. He's one of my very favorite Mormon historians. This book is really good. If you're interested in this subject, just came out in 2019. Not an easy read. It took me a long time to get through it, but this is the book I used a lot for this video. All right, so a lot of conflict going on. The apostle and in the first presidency, Willard Richards, pictured above, he said, "My voice is for war." And he says, "Exterminate them." And then Brigham Young said, "I say go and kill them." So a lot of conflict, a lot of war, really a hard time to be alive. All right, Thomas Bullock, General Church Minutes, 1850s, pictured above, says, "The council voted and every hand went up. We shall have no peace until the men are killed off. Never treat an Indian as your equal." So, thinking about killing all of the Indian men and then maybe taking the women and children as servants, which we'll get to in a little bit. If you want a lot of context for this video, you're going to have to read that book, and it's going to take a long time to get through all the accounts in there written by Indians and semi-literate people. Their accounts are not easy to read, but to get all the context, the Indians were no angels. They did a lot of bad things too, but this video is kind of about the bad things that the Mormons did to the Indians, the controversial things that Mormons did with Indians, etc. All right, from the Utah Territorial Militia Records, 1849 to 1877. They were to participate in the quelling and staying the operations of all hostile Indians, or they'd call them bad Indians sometimes, exterminating such as do not separate themselves from their hostile class. So if they're hostile Indians, bad Indians, the idea was basically to exterminate them. And this is according to the Mormons. This is according to the U.S. government. Basically, there was a program to exterminate all bad or hostile Indians. All right, statement from the prophet Brigham Young, also in the Thomas Bullock Minutes. "If we don't kill those Lake Utes, they will kill us. The Lake Utes live by plunder and robbing. Walker advises us to use them up." That means basically kill them. "I am going to keep up a standing army to lick them up. Joseph Smith prophesied many of the Lamanites will have to be slain, many of them by us," the Mormons. All right, there was also programs to get Indians out of certain areas that were desirable to the Mormons. General Daniel H. Wells, pictured above, headed for Fort Utah with Brigham Young's orders not to leave that valley until every Indian was out. So they'd see a desirable area, a desirable valley, push all the Indians out, and basically take the Indians' land. All right, Prophet Brigham Young again in a letter to Daniel H. Wells in 1850. "If they, the Utah Valley Indians, continue hostile, pursue them until you use them up." Kill them, basically. "Let it be peace with them or extermination." So if they were hostile, if they were warlike, if they killed any of the Mormons, then they were going to be exterminated. All right, from a book by Brigham D. Madsen, Exploring the Great Salt Lake, the Stansbury Expedition. He says, Lieutenant Ferguson says that the party surprised on Table Mountain would not give up their arms or smoke the pipe of peace. These are the Indians. Some tried to run off and were shot. The rest, I guess, who did not run off, were also shot. So they just wiped out this group. All right, a letter from John Gunnison to his wife, Martha, in 1850 from the same book. The warriors and women were kept under guard that night, and in the morning all were disarmed, and the male Indians were all shot. This band, which has been so fully thrashed and nearly exterminated, has been called the worst Indians. All right, statement here from the First Presidency of the Church, which comprised Brigham Young, Heber C. Kimball, and Willard Richards at the time. First Presidency wrote a letter to John Bernheisel in 1850, and they said, "It is our wish that the Indian title should be extinguished." That is the title to their lands. The title should be extinguished, and the Indians removed from our territory or Utah. So this is the First Presidency. They're saying they want all the Indians removed from the territory of Utah, which did not happen. We wish for the government to buy out and transplant the Indians. So screw their ownership of the land, screw their way of life, screw their ways, of hunting and whatever. They wanted to buy them out and transplant them and get them out of the territory. All right, the First Presidency continues. Same source, same letter here. The sooner the Indians of this country are removed to some better country and instructed properly, the better for them and the better for Deseret, or the territory of Utah. Not true. It would not be better for them. This was their home, their lands, their hunting grounds, and they had to live there for thousands of years. Maybe it would be better for the territory of Utah, better for Deseret, better for the Mormons, better for Brigham Young to have them all driven out, because then they wouldn't have to worry about Indian depredations, getting their cattle stolen, coming up to their house begging for food when they're starving in the middle of winter, or killing Mormons. All right, the perspective of LDS historian B.H. Roberts in the Comprehensive History of the Church. He says, "It was no part of the policy of Brigham Young and the church leaders to be unduly familiar or treat as equals these degraded Indian tribes of the Salt Lake region who were cursed with a dark skin. Brigham Young didn't think the Indians could be helped by the whites." So interesting perspective here by B.H. Roberts. Don't become too unduly familiar with them was the Mormon strategy. Don't treat them as equals. They are degraded and, cursed with a dark skin. All right, pretty direct statement here from Will Bagley, and the whites want everything. Mormon Indian policy involved seizing their land, destroying anyone who resisted, and enslaving the survivors. So Mormons just came in, took the land that they wanted, built their settlements where they wanted, killed any of the Indians who tried to stop them, and enslaved or put in indentured servitude the women and children, enslaving the survivors. So even though the Mormons looked at the Indians as being the Lamanites and basically from Israelites, that still didn't stop them from taking their land. Mormons needed a place to go. They needed and wanted that land, and they just basically took it. And they had greater firepower with their weapons than the Indians did. All right, so how did the prophet Brigham Young look at these Indians in Utah? He's talking about the snake diggers or the Cumumbas in this letter to Luke Leah, who I guess was the Indian commissioner. This is 1851. So Brigham Young says, in my first acquaintance with them, the snake diggers and Cumumbas, they appeared inoffensive and in fact utterly incompetent. They suffered with cold and hunger and filthiness. They presented the lowest, most degraded, and loathsome specimen of human existence that I ever beheld. Doesn't look too highly upon them, kind of like how he looked upon the black people, African Americans. He said they were filthy, low, degraded, and loathsome. All right, another statement from Bagley's book. Some Indians killed a man named Lorenzo Custer, I guess a Mormon, Lorenzo Custer. And then in retaliation, 5 Indians were shot in cold blood by the said Orrin Porter Rockwell, pictured above, Lot Smith, and Ed Walker. All killed 5 Indians in retaliation or revenge. All who were Mormons, who gave no reason for shooting them, nor was there any evidence whatever against the Indians or their having committed any offense. So probably wasn't the Indians that killed Lorenzo Custer. They just wanted revenge. Sounds like they just found 5 random Indians, shot them all dead in cold blood, without any evidence for them doing anything. So this is how the cycle of violence started and continued in these early days of Utah. All right, an account here from Peter Gottfredson's book, History of Indian Depredations, 1919. It says, after some Goshute Indians in Skull Valley near Tooele stole some cattle and property, Mormons attempted to chastise the savages. The savages were surprised in their wickiups, and I'll show a picture of that later. They were surprised in their wickiups just at daybreak, and the males were almost annihilated. So these Goshute Indians near Tooele, Utah, stole some cattle and property. That was a common Indian depredation. Went in, gathered up all the males, and mostly annihilated all the males. All right, so again, in retaliation for stealing cattle, this is Captain William McBride to General Daniel H. Wells. Daniel H. Wells was a general. I think they still called it the Nauvoo Legion, even though they were in Utah. It says, other Tooele Indians' property and stolen cattle were burned by the Mormons. We went around and burned everything we could find in their camp, including the meat, which was principally dried. So that's not very nice, going around and burning up all their dwellings, all their wickiups. All right, same account here, same source. Gonna get revenge. Gonna teach these savages a lesson, and boy did they. This is kind of a disturbing account here. We wish that you, or we wish you without a moment's hesitation to send us about a pound of arsenic. We want to give the Indians well a flavor. Pretty harsh stuff here. We want to give the Indians a flavor of arsenic on their food. Also a spade to dig for water. A little bit of strychnine would be of a fine service and serve instead of salt to their too fresh meat. So instead of putting a little bit of salt on their meat, the Mormons are going to put some strychnine on it and basically poison and kill these poor Indians. All right, same account here, Captain William McBride to General Daniel H. Wells, 1851. And this video goes mostly in chronological order. Most obediently, etc., etc., Captain William McBride. So this is a postscript. He says, don't forget the arsenic. Don't forget the spade and the arsenic. Don't forget the spade, the strychnine, and the arsenic that they were going to flavor and salt the Indians' meat with. All right, letter from Henry Day to Luke Leah, 1852. The Indian chief Soweret had the following to say: Americans are good. Mormons are no good. Americans are friends. Mormons kill and steal and take our land. So the Indians differentiated between the Americans and the Mormons. The Mormons were kind of an odd and peculiar people and kind of treated the Indians different, treated them as Lamanites, treated them as Israelites, tried to teach them the Book of Mormon, etc., as an ancient record of their ancestors. Didn't get very far with their teachings of the Indians, although they did baptize a lot of them. So an account, from Chief Soweret, basically saying, I don't like these Mormons. They kill and they steal and they take our land. All right, Jacob H. Holman to the U.S. House in 1852. It says, some of the Indians said that the whites were constantly shooting them, that the whites would profess friendship, call them to their camp, and then shoot them, that the whites would steal their horses and sometimes take them by force. So, Americans did some of this. Mormons did some of this. All right, Holman to Brigham Young, 1853 letter. A band of Indians under the leadership of Nemateka said they would kill all the whites that passed the road, as the whites had killed his son and 5 of his braves without any cause whatsoever. So this cycle of violence. All right, Holman to Brigham Young, 1853. The Indian Nemateka said that the whites would not be friendly with him, that the whites had killed his son and his men and had taken their horses and guns without any cause. They were determined to be revenged on the whites. So this kind of went back and forth. Stealing horses, stealing guns. Okay, the Go-Shoot Indian people are survivors, wrote the historian Dennis Deffa. They outlasted the unjust epithets, the lies, and the outright barbarity of the white invaders. All right, statement from Bagley. The beatings, skirmishes, and ambushes that Utah settlers habitually inflicted on native peoples had not relented since 1849. Beating them, skirmishes or fights, ambushes on them, killing them. All right, another disturbing statement by Bagley. Utah leaders had long since decided to draw borders around native peoples, put them in reservations, etc., and then shrink the reservations. They wanted to segregate them, compel the dependent Lamanites to become white and delightsome, and exterminate all who would resist. And in Bagley's book, it talks about the Latter-day Saints purchasing Native American children. And, of course, they made the arguments that it was for their own good. So Isaac Morley testified that Latter-day Saints purchased native children. This is basically slavery, indentured servitude. Purchased native children to save them from misery, starvation, cruelty, and death, which was echoed by Brigham Young, who claimed that citizens bought the Indians to obtain their liberty and to save them from starvation, abuse, and even death. Conflict in terms there, right? Citizens or Mormons bought the Indians to obtain their liberty. So now that they're indentured servants, now they have liberty and freedom. That sounds like something Orwell would say, right? So Brigham Young was not against slavery either for blacks or for Indians. The Mormon legislature passed laws regulating slavery. Utah was the only part of the Mexican cession open to black slavery. Brigham Young was open to the idea of black slavery and by extension, Indian slavery. As governor, Brigham Young believed that the Bible justified slavery and polygamy, and so enforced the Fugitive Slave Act. All right, statement from Brigham Young here in 1852. This can be found in John G. Turner's book, Brigham Young, Pioneer Prophet, which came out in 2012, an excellent book. In 1852, Brigham Young said, "I am a firm believer in slavery, and inasmuch as I believe in the Bible, inasmuch as I believe in the ordinances of God, in the priesthood and order and decrees of God, I must believe in slavery." Because, of course, slavery was okay in the Bible, right? So he says, yeah, I believe in the Bible. I believe in the ordinances of God, and therefore I believe in slavery. I am a firm believer in slavery. And you can look at the meme above for a little bit more context for this quote. All right. An article in the Atlantic Monthly, 1859, says that in 1858, Utah had several hundred Indians held in servitude. So Utah Mormons held several hundred Indians in servitude, indentured servants, or basically slaves, to work around the house, take care of the house, engage in farming, and growing their food, etc. Okay, statement from Commissioner Luke Leah. Many Shoshone chiefs were invited to a treaty ceremony. They declined, believing that it was a trap set by the Mormons to kill them. They seem to have but little confidence in anything the Mormon people say to them, and decidedly stand in much fear of them, and from all the information that I could gather, not without good cause. So some of the Shoshones were scared to meet with the Mormons, fearing that it was a trap, that they'd meet with them, gather around all the Mormons, and then kill them. And we have a Shoshone chief, I think, pictured above here, or at least a Shoshone. All right, so one thing that's undeniable is that the Mormons came in and took the Indians' land, and apparently took a lot of the game, or at least drove the game out of the area, because deer and elk and whatnot became more and more scarce. So the Indians became more and more hungry. So this is a statement from M.S. Martinus, 1853. I held a conversation with Indian Chief Walkara. He said that he had always been opposed to the whites settling on the Indian lands. The Mormons, when they first commenced the settlement of Salt Lake Valley, were friendly. There wasn't that many of them, so I'm sure they had to try to be friendly with the Indians. They may have even been outnumbered at first when the first settlers came in, but later they grew in numbers. But yeah, I'm sure none of these Indian tribes were happy about the Mormons coming in and settling on their lands. Okay, so M.S. Martinus continues. The Mormons continued friendly for a short time until they became strong in numbers. Then their conduct and treatment towards the Indians changed. They were not only treated unkindly, but many of the Indians were much abused. Okay, Martinus continues. Sometimes the Indians have been treated with much severity. They have been driven by this population, the Mormons, from place to place. Settlements have been made on all their hunting grounds in the valleys. and the graves of their fathers have been torn up by the whites. So yeah, a lot of the game, the deer and the elk, kind of pushed out of the area, pushed out of the valleys. Graves of their fathers torn up, probably made settlements right on top of their graveyards, which I'm sure they were really sad about. All right, Martinus continues. The Indians were forced to leave their homes or submit to the constant abuses of the whites. He said that the Gosoki Utes, who formerly lived in the Salt Lake Valley, had been killed and driven away. Okay, he continues. The whites seemed to never be satisfied. The Indians had moved time after time, and yet they could have no peace. The Indian's heart was sick, that his heart felt very bad. All right, he continues. Chief Walker, I guess they called him Wakara as well. He's pictured above here. I believe that is the only picture of him, only known picture. Chief Walker. He has always been opposed to the whites settling on his lands. They didn't always say that, to the Americans or the Mormons, because they knew the power and weapons of the whites. So they kind of pretend like, oh yeah, we'll share our lands, but I'm sure they're never happy about it. Chief Walker had been opposed to the whites and the Mormons settling on his lands, but the whites were strong and he was weak. Other Indians say they cannot live with the whites or the Mormons, for they cannot live in peace. The whites want everything, and that was the name of Bagley's book. The whites want everything and will give the Indians nothing. They shoot the Indians if they walk over their grounds. Okay, letter from Major David Moore to Daniel H. Wells, 1853. The Shoshones are very bitter against us and say that this is their ground, and what grass, wood, and all the brethren had is theirs, and they intend to have it. Yes, they intend to have the grass, for their horses and also the wood in the area. I cannot see how we can avoid a fight with them much longer under the present position of affairs. All right, another pretty disturbing account here from Jacob H. Holman to Luke Leah, 1852. The Indians in the Utah Territory have, in the general, been badly treated. The Mormons, being much better armed and equipped than the Indians, caused a most brutal butchery. Pretty sad stuff. I don't mean to laugh at this stuff because it's serious. Mormons caused a most brutal butchery of the Indians. All right, an account here from William R. Brown in an authentic wagon train journal, 1853. I believe the cover's above. The saints at Ogden, Utah were all forting up throughout the whole valley. So a lot of these settlements, they had built these forts that they could protect themselves in and fight the Indians from. They were making ready to receive the Indians with bloody hands and hospitable graves. Okay, Apostle George Albert Smith in the Journal of Discourses, 1853. Smith says, they used to say in Utah that I was a pretty good sort of a fellow until I got to be a colonel. And then Smith says, then I became more savage. All right, another depressing letter here from Andrew Seiler to Brigham Young in 1853. Mormons killed 5 male Indians for stealing. Afterwards, their property, their wives, and their children was brought into the ring. Basically confiscated, I guess. Their property, their wives, and their children. The property and the children were sold to the highest bidder. That's pretty depressing. President Isaac Morley, who's pictured above, bid 3 bushels of wheat for a girl that was 8 or 9 years old, but she was run up to 16 bushels and knocked off to William V. Black, Jr. So William V. Black bought a girl 8 or 9 years old for 16 bushels of wheat. That was the value of an Indian girl. All right, Juanita Brooks, editor of the book Not by Bread Alone, The Journal of Martha Spence Hayward, 1854. Basically just talking about, the cycle of violence. Indians killed one, Mormons killed one. Indians killed 2, Mormons killed 2. Not sure who killed the most or if it was unbalanced. Probably was unbalanced because the Mormons had more power, more weapons. 9 Indians coming into our camp looking for protection and bread with us because we promised it to them, and without knowing they did the first evil act in that affair or any other by murdering some Mormons. So the Indians killed a few, and so the Mormons killed or shot down without 1 minute's notice the Indians. It cast considerable gloom over my mind. So I guess this is Martha Spence Hayward. It would be pretty depressing to see this kind of stuff. It was also very terrifying. The husbands would be out to work in the mill or in the field or wherever, and Indians would just come in and kind of terrorize the Mormon women and children. So it happened on both sides. All right, a statement here from Stanley B. Kimball, pictured above. Adelia Wilcox Memoirs. The next morning before we left, 7 Indians and a squaw, I guess that's a female Indian, came into the fort. The brethren were so exasperated, and Father Morley, being there, ordered them shot down without even considering whether they were the guilty ones or not. Judge, jury, and executioner. Okay, same source here. It was an awful, sickening sight to me. They were shot down like so many dogs, picked up with pitchforks and put on a sleigh and hauled away. The squaw they took prisoner, so I guess she became a slave. Okay, same source. It was afterwards learned that they were Lake Indians from Parvian Valley and had no hand in the murdering of our brethren. All right, so they called this event the Nephi Massacre, and they were actually excavated some bones from the scene of the crime. This showed up in the Nephi Times News in 2007. Article by Myrna Trontavane, not sure how to say that. In August of 2006, workers excavating a foundation uncovered 7 skeletons, evidence of what the press called the Nephi Massacre. Okay, Nephi Times News continues. The 7 individuals, all male and all between the ages of 12 and 35, whom state archaeologists recovered, showed the purported skirmish recorded in traditional histories was actually a cold-blooded execution. So when we get some actual physical evidence, it doesn't look too good for the Mormons. And one of the skeletons was age 12, so that's a pretty young kid to be killed. All right, same news story here in the Nephi Times News. Never read anything out of there before. 2007. The bodies tossed into a shallow mass grave showed clear evidence of gunshot trauma to the head, pelvic region, or leg. Weird to shoot him in the pelvic region. 5 of the skeletons revealed blunt force wounds, I guess hitting or maybe with a bat, while 4 indicated trauma to the left forearm or wrist. So maybe trying to protect themselves. All right, they had an archaeologist at the site. His name was Ronald J. Rood, and he made a report. He was the site's principal investigator. He interpreted the fractures as defensive wounds, suggesting that the natives were severely beaten prior to being shot. So that's not cool. Sounds like they were beating the crap out of them, maybe torturing them, and then shooting them. So physical evidence found at the scene of the crime. This is in his report, The Archaeology of a Mass Grave from Nephi, Utah. Came out in 2016. All right, short statement from John W. Gunnison in his book, The Mormons or Latter-day Saints in the Valley of the Great Salt Lake, blah, 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 1852. The Mormons were more effective than an army against the Indians on the west. All right, statement from Benjamin Madley in his book, An American Genocide, 2016, The United States and the California Indian Catastrophe. It took sustained political will at both the state and federal levels to create the laws, policies, and well-funded killing machine needed to destroy native peoples. So that applies, not only to Mormons. All right, another statement from the prophet Brigham Young in 1848 called the Indians the devil and said they are not equal to the whites. Brigham Young says, treat them as Indians and not as your equals. Not as your equals. Tie up your animals so that the devil or the Indians cannot get them. All right, a book from 1856, Solomon Nunez Carvalho, not sure how to say that, Incidents of Travel and Adventure in the Far West. Utah Chief says, Mormon say that they no kill any more Indian. Mormon no tell the truth. Plenty of Utah's Indians have gone to the Great Spirit, and it was the Mormons who killed them. All right, another account in Wilford Woodruff's journal in 1854 talking about the Mormons buying Indian children. Chief Walker or Wakara received his presents and killed a beef for the Indians to have a feast. I guess they killed a cow. The Mormons and Brigham Young also traded and swapped blankets for horses, and they bought 2 children that were prisoners. The Mormons and Brigham Young bought 2 children that were prisoners. So they probably thought they were going to provide them with a better life. All right, from George W. Bean's diary and autobiography, Chief Walker forced them, the Mormons, to take 8 little Indians or slaves rather than have them butchered by the cruel Utes. So this is a complicated situation, I guess. And, it needs further context. You could probably make an entire video about this and give more context about these poor little kids in really dire circumstances, and sometimes they'd be killed by their own peoples or by other Indian tribes. So, and then Chief Walker forced the Mormons to take 8 little Indian slaves rather than have them butchered by the Utes. So, sad situation. All right, letter from J.D. Wood to D.B. Huntington, 1855. Over at Palmyra, Utah last week, didn't know there was a Palmyra in Utah, on Tonger or Black Hawk shot a cow or a creature, and then the Mormons took 2 of the Utah Indians and whipped them considerable. Black Hawk shot a cow, probably for food. Mormons took 2 of the Indians and whipped them. So Mormons were not opposed to doing certain types of torture. All right, William Chandless's book, A Visit to Salt Lake, 1857, says that Brigham Young had Wakara, the Indian chief, a very determined foe of the Mormons, secretly put to death and buried by Jordan, I guess Jordan River. Brigham Young had one of the main chiefs in Utah secretly put to death. All right, Mary Etty Correa also talks about this in the book 15 Years Among the Mormons, 1858. She says, Chief Walkara suddenly died from some unknown cause. The prophet Brigham Young seldom failed to accomplish his aims, such as the death of the Chief Walkara, whether by natural or foul means. Brigham Young somehow put to death this Chief Walkara, maybe through foul means, maybe through poison. All right, they also talked about this in the newspaper, the Los Angeles Star, in 1855. It says, it is reported to the news that Walkara, the Indian chief of the Utahs, has been poisoned. And I guess it was Brigham Young who did that. So a lot of the Indians in Utah got wiped out. Smallpox, the measles, conflict and war, starvation even. Here's a statement from the prophet Brigham Young in 1871 in the Journal of Discourses. He says, how many Indians were here when we the Mormons came? At the warm springs, at this little grove where they would pitch their tents, we found perhaps 300 Indians, but I do not suppose that there are 3 of that band left alive now. So this band or group of Indians, about 300, got reduced down to 3 who were alive. The rest, I guess, dead. All right, Brigham Young continues, same source here. There was another band a little bit south, another one north, another one further east, but I do not suppose there is 1 in 10, perhaps not 1 in 100, that are now alive of those who were here when we first came. So pretty much annihilation, extermination, not 1 in 10, not 1 in 100 maybe that are still alive. All right, some more information about Mormons and poison, or poisoning Indians. B.H. Roberts comments in his Comprehensive History of the Church that Brigham Young sent 3 missionaries to China, 9 missionaries to India, and 3 more to Thailand. What were they doing there? Well, there was an article in the San Francisco Herald in 1857 that presented facts that it acknowledged were too incredible for belief, charging that the Mormons had sent missionaries to search for an insidious but fatal poison. They found many of these poisons in China. So maybe that's what they were doing. Brigham Young sending missionaries to China. Part of their mission, I guess, was to obtain different poisons. All right, another little tidbit of information regarding this, getting poison. Hosea Stout wrote a letter to Brigham Young from Hong Kong in 1853. Stout says, do not feel that we are discouraged or cast down, for we only want the proper element to act upon, and we feel assured that we can produce the proper compound. What were these elements? What were these compounds that he was trying to find in Hong Kong? Well, probably poison, so that they could use that against their enemies, and against the Indians, etc. And Hosea Stout is pictured above. All right, some more information in the diary of Hosea Stout, 1853. This was compiled by Juanita Brooks. Hosea Stout, looking for this proper compound in Hong Kong, He was only there 56 days, so not very long. Maybe one of his primary purposes for going to Hong Kong was to get this proper compound or poison. All right, statement from Brigham Young in his office journal, 1860. He says, Mr. Ruth inquired if it was difficult to rear Indian children. The president, Brigham Young, said that it was. I have an Indian woman who assists me in the housekeeping and is an excellent hand at that work. I obtained her when she was a child. So maybe bought her. Maybe she became an indentured servant. All right. Statement in the book Coyote Was Going There, 1977, edited by Gerald Ramsey, says the white people took everything away from the Indian because they were snakes. White people were snakes. The whites told the Indians to go way out in the mountains and live, kind of clear them out of their hunting grounds, clear them out of the valleys, and push them up into the mountains. All right, so it seems that the Utah Indians had a lot different standards in morality or chastity. They would do these scantily clad dances, which the Mormons called whore dances. This is from Brigham Young's office journals, again, 1856. In September of 1856, Dimmock Huntington, pictured above, reported that the Indians occasionally had what they called a whore dance. A whore dance, which was lewd and wrong. All right, so what to do about these dances with the fairly naked Indians? Well, Brigham Young said that we should whip, or that they should whip these female Indians who have a totally different culture, totally different standards. You have to send a message that this is not acceptable, because the Mormon boys and men would congregate around the Indians and watch these dances. So Brigham Young told Dimmock Huntington to whip these Indians, that they might desist from these dances and practices. This is recorded in his office journals in 1856. All right, an account here from Wild Bill Hickman in his book Brigham's Destroying Angel, 1872. Brigham Young sent Bill Hickman to quiet the Shoshone Indians down in some way or other, and if I could not make peace with them any other way, pitch in and kill those that would not come to terms. So that was the instructions to Wild Bill Hickman. Those that do not come to terms, basically, with whatever the Mormons and the whites wanted, that they should be killed. All right, there's an account of Mormons using strychnine to poison wolves that would come in and get their livestock. So we know that they had strychnine and probably arsenic. In the cold winter, wolves began killing their livestock. So the Mormons put out strychnine and trapped their ravenous enemies. So yeah, wolves were enemies, and Indians, some of the more, they call them bad Indians, were also enemies. All right, a letter from William Appleby to Brigham Young, 1854. The U.S. did not admit of the Indians, the Shoshones, etc., owning 1 foot of the land nor anything else. The United States government, Army, etc., did not admit that the Indians owned 1 foot of land. And Mormons probably pretty similar. But they claimed all Upper and Lower California by conquest. This is the U.S. government, U.S. Army. And purchase of Mexico, etc., etc. Mexico formerly owned the Utah Territory. So this is just the way it was. The U.S. and the Mormons just took their land. All right, an account here in James S. Brown's book, Life of a Pioneer, 1900. there was really a battle for resources between the whites, the Mormons, and the Indians. A lot more people coming in. Maybe not enough resources for everybody. Washakie, an Indian chief, said that the buffalo and elk came here to drink water and eat the grass, but now they have been killed or driven back out of the land. So it seemed like the deer and the elk, etc., became less and less. The grass is all eaten off by the white man's horses and cattle, and the dry wood has been burned. So a lot of the game's disappearing. The white man's horses and cattle are eating all the good grass and burning all the good wood. All right, same source here. Washakie continues. That's always good to hear things, first person from the Indians themselves. So he continues, when our young men have been hunting and got tired and hungry, they have come to the white man's camp and have been ordered to get out, and they are slapped and kicked and called damn Injuns. And Washakie is pictured above. All right, same source here. Sometimes they have been so abused that they have threatened to kill all of the white men that they meet in our land. We can point to many abuses that we have patiently suffered from him, the white man. All right, so same source here, I guess still Washakie. Now I can see that he only loves himself. That's the white man. He loves his own flesh, and he does not think of us, the Indians. He loves his heap money. It's funny how the Indians call that. The white man loves his heap money. Another thing they would say is they like to hunt money. Because the Indians really had no concept of money at all. He has a big bag full of it, that is, money. He got it on my land and would not give me a little piece of the money. All right, some more information about resources. David Moore to James Ferguson, 1854. Since the fall of 1853, the Weber Band of Indians had complained about the whites using up all their lands and wood, and some of them seem more sulky about it than they have been heretofore. So, yeah, using their land, their grass, their wood, their game, their elk, their deer, their buffalo. It's easy to see why the Indians would feel sad and sulky about this. All right, some information about these Weber County Indians taking their weapons and basically turning them into indentured servants. Brown, Bill Hickman, Elisha Ryan, and Dimmick Huntington delivered an order to Major Moore and the citizens of Weber County to disarm Chief Little Soldier and his band of Indians and distribute them among the Mormons. Disarm them, take them, and distribute these Indians among the Mormons, who are best able to feed and clothe them for the winter, and set them to work. Take their arms, bring them into the Mormon communities, and put them to work. Well, this was basically indentured servitude or slavery. Now, was it better than starving in the mountains, maybe? In the winter, not able to obtain food? Maybe. All right, the account continues. This can be found in Bagley's book, The Whites Want Everything. The Shoshones were so hostile that we had to make a show of arms before they would submit to our proposition of distributing them among the whites. The Mormons disarmed them. So they're hostile. The Mormons make a show of arms. Indians then submit to coming into the Mormon settlements and being distributed among the whites or the Mormons to now be workers. All right, James S. Brown also talks about this in his book. The Shoshones could husk corn chop wood, help do chores, and be more comfortable than if they were left to roam around. But for all that, they were deprived of that broad liberty to which they and their fathers before them had been accustomed. Therefore, they felt it most keenly. So before the Mormons came, they were free, roam wherever they wanted. They had their hunting grounds. There was more game. They had that broad liberty and freedom to do what they wanted. Mormons come in, whites come in, turn them into indentured servants. All right, so who really did own the land? Well, Brigham Young said that it was the Lord. The Lord owned the land, and of course, Brigham Young was the Lord's agent. Brigham Young was the Lord's servant. And so Brigham Young basically said, yes, this is the Mormons' land. But this is a letter, I guess, from Brigham Young to Washakie, maybe, 1855. No matter where we, the Mormons, settle, you, the Indians, feel that it is an infringement upon your rights. But it is not so. The land is the Lord's, and so are the cattle, and so is the game. And of course, Brigham Young is the mouthpiece of the Lord. How convenient, right? All right, some more information from John Pulsifer in his Shoshone Mission Journal, 1855 to 1857. Chief Wakates said the reason why they did not smoke that tobacco that the Mormons brought was because the mountaineers had told them that the Mormons was coming with poison tobacco to kill the Indians. Again, another idea of poison. Mountaineers told the Indians that Mormons were coming with poisoned tobacco, so do not smoke it. Okay, a letter from James S. Brown to Brigham Young, 1855. They told us that they had heard of our coming, that's the Mormons coming, and that E.B. Ward had poisoned tobacco for them, and that the letters were also poison. So they refused to smoke the tobacco until Brother Ward had taken a hearty chew of it. So there was these rumors going around that the Mormons were trying to poison Indians, poisoning tobacco that they would give them, or poisoning letters, sounds like. This may have happened. I believe also that the white Americans would give them blankets that were contaminated with smallpox. Knowingly. They would do that knowingly. And also a lot died of measles and other things. All right, we've talked a little bit about Wild Bill Hickman, one of the henchmen of Brigham Young. A little more information about him here in J.R. Brown, Journal of a Trip Across the Plains, 1856. Wild Bill Hickman, pictured above, was a most foul and bloody murderer. Old Man Hatch had heard that Hickman was the leader of the Danites, or as they are called in the Mormon language, the Destroying Angels. I have heard some most atrocious stories concerning him, Hickman, and his gang of robbers, thieves, and murderers. All right, an account here from James A. Little, Jacob Hamblin, a narrative, 1881, talking about the Paiutes stealing from the Mormons. If they did this, they would have to pay a price. I guess pay for what they had taken. Or the Indians were stripped, tied to a tree, and whipped, according to the magnitude of the offense. The Indians did the whipping. Wow, Indians whipping their own people. While Jacob Hamblin, a Mormon, he's pictured above, generally dictated the number and severity of the lashes. So Mormons engaged in this whipping of Indians, basically torturing them. All right, comment here from Bagley. Native peoples managed the Americans and Mormons brilliantly, basically playing both sides, getting as much out of the Americans, the U.S. government, as they could, and getting as much as they could out of the Mormons. So they played that game brilliantly, and you can read all those accounts in Bagley's book, The Whites Won Everything. But the Indians still found their resources disappearing, like the buffalo pictured above, and their families trapped between white power struggles that threatened their survival. All right, Bagley continues. Starvation, brutal winters, and epidemics compelled the Indians to resist the relentless seizure of their beloved lands. So it was just a brutal time to be alive for the Mormons and for the Indians. Brutal winters in Utah. I grew up in Utah, so I know how much it can snow there. I know how cold it gets. I can't imagine going on hunting expeditions for food in the dead of winter or in the dead of a blizzard. Just it had to be really tough to get food for the Indians. All right, the Circleville Massacre. Bagley talks about this. The largest massacre of Indians in Utah history took place about April 24th, 1866, at Circleville, Utah. Circleville is about 1 hour north of Cedar City. I was actually born in Cedar City. The Mormon settlers disarmed as many as 30 Paiutes of the Kusharim band, imprisoned them in a log church, and killed them. Disarmed 30 Paiutes, imprisoned them in a log church, and then killed them. All right, a letter from William Allred to George Albert Smith, 1866. More about this Circleville massacre. After reasoning some time with them, I took their arms, which they parted with reluctantly. The whole band was taken then and disarmed and put under guard and sent to Colonel Dame, who I believe was also involved in the Mountain Meadows massacre. At nightfall, our prisoners rushed on the guard, with clubs striking them with the same. So they're making a claim that the prisoners rushed the guard and then were hitting him with clubs. That may or may not have been true. The guard killed 16 of them, which was all of the band except for 4 children, which we have yet. So the guard killed 16 by himself. That doesn't really add up to me. Which was all of the band except for 4 children, which we have yet. So they took in the children into their homes. Very similar to the Mountain Meadows massacre, right? All right, more information from Bagley. Since the victims were Indians and the circumstances horrific, most historians have forgotten the Circleville massacre. I didn't even know about it until I read this book, so I think this is pretty obscure to most Mormons and even a lot of historians, it sounds like. The Paiute men, bound with sticks and ropes, were shot down as they allegedly attempted to escape. All right, Bagley continues. Their captors, who were the Mormons, murdered at least 11 women and children as they were brought one by one from a cellar. Similar to Mountain Meadows, right? Killing a lot of the women and children. A.C. Anderson saw the whites slit the throat of the first victim brought up. Slitting the throats of the women and children. That probably had something to do with blood atonement. All right, historian D. Michael Quinn was aware of this, I guess, and he made a statement in his book, Extensions of Power. Quinn noted that slitting the throats of only the women and children seemed to be a special application of LDS teachings, as if the Paiute men did not deserve this rite of blood atonement. Only the women and children deserved blood atonement, atoning for their sins, because, of course, the atonement of Christ doesn't atone for all sins. And Brigham Young made a pretty long list of a lot of different things, even getting down to stealing horses, which requires blood atonement. Perhaps both massacres were ritualistic murders calculated to save the victims' souls. All right, so here's some information that kind of shows that the Mormons had the advantage over the Indians. Yes, some Mormons did get killed by Indians, but the Mormons sound like they killed a lot more Indians than the Indians killed Mormons. This comes from John Alton Peterson's book, Utah's Black Hawk War, 1998. The Black Hawk War had killed perhaps 70 Mormons and several hundred Utes, Paiutes, Pavants, and Navajos. Historical statistics are guesswork, but between 1865 and 1875, the Ute population fell from 23,000 to 10,000. So Mormons got the best of the Indians in the Black Hawk War, sounds like, better armed. And the population of these Indians dropped considerably from 23,000 to 10,000. Of course, a lot of that was disease. All right, so from the same book, Utah's Black Hawk War talks about killing women and children on both sides. This war was calamitous. The slaughter of native and white or Mormon women and children led to lingering bitterness and the abandonment of more than 25 Mormon settlements. So white women and children getting destroyed on both sides leads, of course, to lingering bitterness. It was no picnic for the Mormons either out in this Wild West. They had to abandon 25 settlements due to the Indians. All right, so the U.S. government and the U.S. Army was determined to push the Utah Indians into reservations. And then they would actually shrink the reservations. And really, these Ute Indians we're talking about here on the Uinta reservation really didn't have enough resources on these reservations to survive. So this is John Wesley Powell visit to a certain Indian, I can't pronounce that, on the Uinta reservation in 1869. When agents and army officers threatened to force the Utes back to the Uinta reservation, the Indians refused and challenged the officers to fight. They had determined to fight rather than to stay on the reservation and starve, for they feared hunger more than they did the soldiers. All right, so how much of the land did Brigham Young want? Well, he says that he wants it all, basically, except for these few small reservations. This is back from a comment here from Bagley. Brigham Young claimed that the Lord owned the land, and as God's agent, he distributed stewardships of land as he saw fit. The Lord owned the land, and of course Brigham Young is his only agent, his prophet, and so it's his right to give stewardships of land to the Indians. Brigham Young told Ute leaders in 1865 that the Mormons would occupy it and spread abroad until we occupy the whole of it. Brigham Young wanted to occupy the whole of the land. All right, short statement from Bagley again. The record provides plenty of evidence to condemn Mormon treatment of American Indians. All right, Bagley continues. He's talking about poison again. And the picture here is called a wickiup. This is what a lot of the Indians lived in the Utah Territory. Not sure how you make that. Some kind of a wooden structure, and then you kind of cover it with, I don't know what that is, sticks or hay or grass. Anyway, Bagley says, did Mormons poison the Goshute, the Shoshone, and the Ute people? Nauvoo Legion Captain William McBride's 1852 demand for strychnine indicates that they did, but such claims are challenged, of course, especially by the Mormons. All right, Bagley continues. Near Brigham City in August of 1857, Dimmick Huntington found 400 much excited Shoshones afraid of being poisoned. The Utes at Spanish Fork jammed bread into his mouth in June of 1858 and said, "Eat it, for it is poison, and you want to kill us," for they believe that the Mormons used poison on them. All right, an account from Levan Martineau, Poisoning of Indians at Manti. This is in the book The Southern Paiutes, 1992. Legends, Lore, Language, and Lineage. They said Walker Ammon told Levan Martineau that he found an Indian camp near Manti with nobody around. Indians at Nephi said that the white men had given the Indians poisoned meat and flour, and it had killed them all. And that's going to do it for this video. Again, if you're looking for further context, please read Bagley's book, The Whites Want Everything. It's really good. It's long. It's hard to get through, but I recommend it. It's probably the best book on this subject. But this video is basically just pointing out some of the controversial things that the Mormons did regarding the Indians. There's plenty here to chew on that you can go and do further research if you want more information, if you want more context. This is just an hour kind of overview of some of these most controversial things, and there's quite a bit of disturbing things here to chew on. But that's going to do it for this video, and I thank you for watching the Brigham Young's Extermination of Utah Indians video.